Good morning, students. Yeah, say your prayer. Yeah, thank you. நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் விருதுமுறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் விருதுமுறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் விருதுமுறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். Okay, students, take your social science book. Yeah, take page number 21. In today's class, we will discuss about the Mesopotamian civilization. Okay, so the society. Yeah, so what was the important features? What was in the Mesopotamian civilization? So the people of Mesopotamia. We will discuss in our today's class. So in our previous class, we have discussed about the geographical location of Mesopotamia. So why it got the name Mesopotamia? So so Meso means in between. Potamus means river. So the civilization developed in between the two rivers. So what are the two rivers? Yeah, Tigris and Euphrates. So that's why it was called as Mesopotamia. So it is located in present day Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Syria countries. Okay, then we discussed about the four kingdoms. So what are the four kingdoms? Yeah, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, then Assyrian. So these are the four kingdoms that was seen. So that were developed in this region. So we discussed each kingdom. Okay, in our previous class. So today's class we will move into the lifestyle of the people. Okay, so we have seen the first kingdom that was developed in the Mesopotamia was the Sumerian. So Sumerian was followed by Akkadians. Then so who was the famous ruler of Akkadian? The Sargon of Akkad. So in this document, how was the Indus Valley civilization mentioned? Meluha. So Indus Valley was mentioned as Meluha. We also discussed that also. Then Babylonian. Okay, so they were the Semitic people. So they were from Arabian desert. Okay, so we discussed that also. Then finally we discussed about Assyrian. So who was the famous king of Assyrian? Ashurbanipal. So we discussed about him. Then which was the greatest epic of the Mesopotamian civilization? Gilgamesh. Okay, so we have discussed about the four kingdoms and the important features of each kingdom. Okay, so in today's class we will discuss about the lifestyle of the people of Mesopotamia. So lifestyle and the society and the culture, agriculture, trade activities of the Mesopotamian civilization. So let us move into the lesson. So society, state, administration. So how was the Sumerian cities look like? So first, the Sumerian civilization had many city-states. So the Sumerian. So the first kingdom, Sumeria. So that civilization had many city-states. A typical Sumerian city was surrounded by cultivable land. Okay, so that is in the center, the Sumerian city, it was surrounded by cultivable land. So the fortified Sumerian cities had the temples called ziggurats at its center. So in the city you can find a temple called as ziggurat at its center. Okay, so in the city, so the city was surrounded by cultivable land. At the center of the city, it was their temple called as ziggurat. Okay, so the city was built with fort. Okay, so the city was a fort. Fortified means so built with a strong fort. So made stronger. So the temple was controlled by the priest. Okay, so the Sumerian civilization had many city-states. So each Sumerian city was surrounded by a cultivable land. So it has many city-states. So each city was surrounded by cultivable land. So at the center of the city, so at the center of the fortified city, it was their temple, which was called as ziggurat. So at the center of the fortified cities, it was their temple called as ziggurat. That means so temple at the center surrounded by their houses and other things, so other constructions. Then it was wholly surrounded by a fort. So it was wholly, so fully surrounded by a fort. Then the city was surrounded by cultivable land. Okay, so the temple, the ziggurat, it was controlled by the priest. So priest means already we know. So those who do religious ceremonies were called as priest. So the temple was controlled by the priest. So priests, scribes and nobles were part of the government. So the rulers and priests occupied the top of the social hierarchy. Okay, so priest, scribe. So scribe means, so initially there is no printing press. So during that time, but what they did for writings? Yeah, so scribes were the persons those who write and store the documents. Okay, so scribes were the persons those who write and store the documents. So before the invention of printing press. Okay, so nobles, so they were the high class people. Okay, so they were the part of the government. So in the social order, so in the social arrangement, so the rulers and the priest occupied the top position. Then who was the chief priest? Yeah, the ruler performed the role of the chief priest. Yeah, so the king was considered as the chief priest. So already we have discussed this. Yeah, so where we have discussed this? Yeah, in the Sumerians. Yeah, so during the early phase of the Sumerian civilization, king acted as the chief priest. Okay, so the king acted as the chief priest. Then the scribes, merchants and the artisans were placed next in the hierarchy. Okay, so in the social order, the rulers and the priests occupied the top position. Then the second place, so the next place was given to the scribes, merchants and artisans. Yeah. So the scribes, so they maintained the account of the taxes and the priests collected the taxes. Yeah, so the scribes, so they maintained the account of the taxes. Yeah, so the tax collected by the priest were maintained by the scribes. So they only wrote how much tax was collected, from whom the tax was collected, and what purpose the tax amount was spent. So this was written and maintained by the scribes. So the priest, so who were at the temples, so the priest collect the taxes. Okay, so the priest who controlled the temple will also collect the taxes from the common people. Okay, so the scribes, merchants and the artisans were placed next in the hierarchy. So the scribes, so they maintain the account of the taxes while the priest collect the taxes. Okay, so the priest in the temple collect the taxes while the scribes so maintain the account of the taxes. Okay. So we know, so the priest collect the taxes. So the priest were in temples. Okay, so the temples acted as storehouses of the taxed commodities. Okay, so the temples, that is the jigrats, acted as the storehouses of the taxed commodities. Okay, so initially there was no money, so the barter system was followed. So the tax means they collect the commodities, so they collect the goods. So they collect the commodities from the people and store it in the temples. So assemblies were also created, so for the administration of the state. So assemblies, so they were created for the administration of the states. Then the cultivable land were owned by the king. So the cultivable land belongs to the king and the higher class people of the society. So the cultivable land were owned by the king and the high class people. Okay, so the temples acted as the storehouses of the taxed commodities. Then the assemblies were also created for the administration of the state. So the cultivable land, so they were owned by the king and the higher classes of people in the hierarchy. So the peasants, so that is the farmers, so the small farmers, so they remained to the temples in the early phase of Mesopotamian civilization. So that means, so they were attached to the jigrat. So that is the peasants, so they had to give their products, so gave their agricultural product to the temples, to the jigrat in the early phase of Mesopotamian civilization, but they became free from that association in the later period. So initially the peasants were attached to the temples, but they were later freed from that association. So they were later freed from the temples, that is the jigrats. So not all the peoples were allowed to live in the cities. So the Mesopotamian civilization, so the people, so not all the people were allowed to live in the cities. Okay, so food and agriculture. So agriculture was the main occupation of the Mesopotamians. So for the Mesopotamians, agriculture was the main work, so main occupation. So they had developed an irrigation system for ensuring the availability of water for agriculture. So the Sumerians, so the Mesopotamians, so they only developed an irrigation system. Okay, so in order to make sure the availability of water, so for agriculture. So what are the crops cultivated by the Mesopotamians? They cultivated wheat, barley, onions, turnips, grapes apples and dates. Yeah, so they only developed the process of irrigation, so the method of irrigation, and they cultivated many crops. Yeah, so why they developed irrigation means in order to make sure the availability of water. Yeah, so agriculture need water. Okay, so they developed for that, they developed irrigation process. Okay, so they cultivated crops like wheat, barley, onion, turnips, grapes, apples and dates. They also domesticated cattle, sheep and goats. Okay, so they also domesticated cattle, sheep and goats. So and the fish was their part of their diet. Yeah, so fish was an important part of their diet. So diet, food. Yeah, so they eat regularly fish. So trade and exchange. So trade was an important economic activity of the Mesopotamian society. Yeah, so while their main occupation was agriculture, their important economic activity was trade. Yeah, so the traders. Yeah, so those who involved in trade was called as traders. So they assisted in the exchange of goods procured from the potters and artisans. Yeah, so they got goods from the potters and artisans and exchange with others. Yeah, so the traders so bought the goods from the potters. So potters means those who made things made of clay. Then artisans, so those who produce things with the help of their hand. Yeah, so the handmade goods. So the handmade goods were done by the artisans. Okay, so they got the goods from the potters and artisans and exchange with the others. Yeah, so with whom they had trade contact. Yeah, they had trade contact with Syria and Asia Minor in their western part, and with Iran and the Indus Valley civilization in the east. Yeah, so from the west, so they had trade contact with Syria and Asia Minor, while in the east they had trade contact with Iran and the Indus Valley civilization. Yeah, so they also traveled in ships across the sea for trade. Yeah, so they also traveled in seas. Okay, wow. So they also traveled in ships across the seas for that trade. Yeah, so trade was an important economic activity. So the traders so procured goods from the potters and artisans. Then they had trade contact with Syria and Asia Minor in the west, and Iran and Indus Valley civilization in the east. They also traveled in ships across the seas for trade. So the economy. So the temple, apart from acting as a storehouses, so they acted as a bank and lent credit on their own account. Yeah, so the temple gave credit so on their own account. So the Mesopotamian documents have references to loan and repayment with or without interest. Okay, so perhaps it was the first written evidence of charging an interest on borrowed money. So now we are having interest while getting loan from bank now. Yeah, so apart from bank, while we get money borrow from any private persons, any finance institution means we have to pay interest now. Yeah, so this type of interest, paying interest was seen in Mesopotamian documents. Okay, so the temple acted as a bank and lent credit on their own account. Yeah, so each temple have their own account. So the temple act like a bank. Yeah, so now also every bank have their own account now. So Karur Vysya Bank, Indian Overseas Bank, State Bank. So each bank have their own account. Okay, so they gave credit. Yeah, so the Mesopotamian documents have references to loan and repayment. Yeah, so they gave, so the documents have references so about loan and the repayment with or without interest. Yeah, so the loan was given with or without interest. Yeah, so this is the first written evidence of charging an interest on borrowed money. Yeah, so from ancient period, so this is the first written evidence of charging an interest on borrowed money. Then cities and town planning. So the Mesopotamian cities featured mud or baked brick walls with gates. Yeah, so the Mesopotamian cities, yeah, so their houses were constructed with mud or baked brick walls with gates. So some people lived in reed huts outside the cities. Yeah, so some people live outside the cities. Yeah, so their house is constructed with reed, see a type of grass with huts. Yeah, so a type of grass reeds. Okay, so lived in reed huts outside the cities. Yeah, so inside the city it was built with baked brick wall along with the gate. So outside the cities, so the people lived in reed huts. Yeah, so the ziggurats were at the city center. Yeah, so ziggurats, so their temple were at the city center on a platform and appeared like a steep pyramids. with staircases leading to the top. So the ziggurats were at the center of the cities. So which lies on a platform, so which lies on a upper surface and appeared like a steep pyramids. So it looked like a steep pyramids leading to the top. So with the staircases. So staircase means a set of stairs inside a building, including the posts and rails that are fixed at the side. So staircase means a set of stairs inside a building, including the posts and rails that are fixed at the side. Okay, so around this temple there were complexes of ceremonial courtyards, shrines, burial chambers for the priests and priestesses, ceremonial banquet halls, along with workshops, granaries, storehouses, and administrative buildings. So around this temple, so the buildings around the temples were complexes of ceremonial courtyard. So courtyard means so nothing but an open space that is partly or completely surrounded by buildings. So courtyard means open space that is surrounded by buildings. Then shrines. So shrines means a place that people visit to worship or it is important to them. So shrine means a place where people went to worship. Then burial chambers. So burial chambers means so the place where the dead bodies were buried. Okay, then ceremonial banquet halls. So banquet. So ceremonial banquet hall means so a place where a formal meal for a large number of people was provided. So banquet hall means ceremonial banquet hall means so during any ceremonial function, so people were provided with food. So especially during special occasion. So if there is any special occasion, so any special religious occasion means so people were provided with the food now. So that is called as ceremonial banquet halls. So the temple were along with the courtyard, shrines, burial chambers, ceremonial banquet halls, along with the workshop, granaries. So granaries means where the agricultural products are placed. So storehouses. Then administrative buildings. So the temple were surrounded by these buildings. So the religion and God. So the religion. So the Sumerian religion was polytheistic. That means so they believed in more than one God. So they have multiple gods. So like our Hindu religion and Egyptian civilization. So Mesopotamians also have many gods. So they worshipped several gods and goddesses. So Enlil and Ninlil. So both were the gods of Sumerians. So the Sumerians prayed to Enlil. So he was the god of sky and wind. So Enlil, he was the god of sky and wind. So the city of Nippur. So there is a city called as Nippur in Mesopotamia. So it was the center of Enlil's worship. So Enlil's main worship place was the city of Nippur. Then Ninlil. So she was the Sumerian goddess of grain. So Enlil was the god of sky and wind, while the Ninlil was the Sumerian goddess of grain. So the Babylonians worshipped Marduk. So shown in this picture, so left side. So the Marduk was worshipped by the Babylonians, while Ashur was the supreme god of Assyrians. So Ashur. So who was the chief priest of the temple of Ashur? The king act as the chief priest. So Ashur, from the name only the word Assyria was derived. So Ashur was the supreme god of Assyrians. So Marduk was worshipped by Babylonians, while the Ashur was worshipped by the Assyrians. So Ashur was the supreme god of Assyrians. Then here three gods were seen: Ishtar, Tiamat, and Sin. So who was Ishtar? So she was goddess of love and fertility. So Ishtar was the goddess of love and fertility, while Tiamat was the god of sea. So you can see in this picture. So she stands above the sea. So Tiamat of the god of the sea, and chaos. So chaos means so the formless matter supposed to have existed before the creation of the universe. So chaos means the formless matter that exists before the universe, creation of universe. And the Sin, the moon of God. So Sin, he was the moon of God. So Ishtar, she was the goddess of love and fertility. Tiamat, the god of sea and chaos, and Sin, the moon god. So these were the gods worshipped by the Mesopotamian people. So the kings, so they were seen as the representatives of the God on earth. So if you take every religion, so they considered king as the representative of God. So the Mesopotamians developed a rich collection of myth and legends. So they have a rich collection of myths and legends. So the most famous epic of them was Gilgamesh, which is written in the cuneiform text. So the most famous epic of the Mesopotamians was written in cuneiform text. So the Gilgamesh written in cuneiform text. It contains a legend of the flood and has similarities with the account of Noah's Ark mentioned in the Bible and other myths in the Hindu Puranas. So other myths in the Hindu Puranas. So the unity among the Mesopotamian civilization, then Hindu Puranas and the Bible was, so the legend of flood, so at the end of the world day, so flood came and it submerged and it merged the whole world. So in our Hindu religion it was says during the Lord Vishnu's Matsya Avatar, so the world was filled with water. So like that, so in Bible also it was mentioned that the world was filled with water during the day where the world is going to end. So there are some relations so in these stories. So there is a legend of the flood and has similarities with the account of Noah's Ark mentioned in the Bible and other myths in the Hindu Puranas. So there is some relations about the flood, so which merged the whole world. Okay students, in today's class we have discussed about the society, state, administration, then food and agriculture of Mesopotamians. So what was their important part of their diet? Fish. So then trade activities. So with which countries they had the trade relationship? In West they had trade contact with Syria and Asia Minor, and in the East they had trade contact with Iran and Indus Valley civilization. Then we discussed about the cities and the town planning. So what was seen at the center of their cities? Ziggurat. So Ziggurat was their temple. Then religion. So what was their religion? So what type of religion was followed? Polytheistic. So name some god. So the worshipped by the Mesopotamians. Enlil, Ninlil, Marduk, Ashur, Ishtar, Tiamat, Sin. Then name the famous epic. So which was their greatest epic of Mesopotamians? Gilgamesh. Okay students, today's class over. In tomorrow's class we will discuss about the Hammurabi's law code, their writing form, their excellence in science and their contribution. So if you have any doubt, contact me. Okay students, note down your today's homework. So take page number 31. Second question. So state the salient features of the ziggurats. So for this, answer is in page number 21 and 22. Take page number 21 first. So right side first line. So the fortified Sumerian cities had the temples called the ziggurats at its center. So first line, right side. 21, page number 21, right side first line. The fortified Sumerian cities had the temples called ziggurats at its center. Then next page. So next page there is a heading, cities and town planning now. So in that third line, that is the third point. So the ziggurats were at the city center on a platform. Second point. So up to that enough. The ziggurats were at the city center on a platform. So second point. Then third point. So in the sixth line. So around this temple were complexes of ceremonial courtyards, shrines, burial chambers for the priests and priestesses, ceremonial banquet halls along with the workshops, granaries, storehouses and administrative buildings. So this is the answer for the second question. So write it. Then for textbook reading, take page number 22, read the religion heading fully. So religion. So page number 22. Okay students. So if you have any doubt, contact me. So don't forget to do your homework. So do your homework regularly and properly. So have a nice day. Thank you.